guys! Today we'll be recapping the manhwa, I Thought It's a Common Possession. If you enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks! Before we begin, I'd like to warn our viewers that there is some discussion and illustration of physical abuse at the beginning of this story. For anyone who might find this triggering, please proceed with caution. Our story begins how most stories end, in a church at the altar. Edith Regelhoff is walking down the aisle, positively glowing in her gorgeous wedding dress. The setting is picture perfect. The only way you can know anything is wrong is by the look in their guests' eyes. They're staring at Edith with hatred, mockery, and even desire. Because the truth is, this is not a picture-perfect wedding. The bride isn't in love with the groom, and he certainly isn't in love with her. Actually, he hates her so much that Edith worries he might end up strangling her. Yikes! Hardship isn't new to Edith. Even in her old life, she had a tough time. Her violent brother had a gambling addiction and always forced her to fund it, until the day when she refused, and he finally snapped, pushing her down the stairs. No way! Her own brother murdered her for money? Talk about heartless! The next thing she knew, that girl woke up as the character Edith from the romance novel she had read just yesterday called Letting Go of the Obsession. If you've read a fantasy rebirth manhwa even just once before, then you can probably already guess which kind of role Edith plays. She's not the protagonist, of course. No, that role belongs to Eliza Sinclair, your stereotypical girl next door turned princess. Born into a lowly and cruel family, Eliza has a hard childhood until she catches the eye of the Duke and Duchess Rudwick, who take her under their wing. That's where she meets the two romantic leads who fight to win the heart of Eliza, hence the name Obsession. And if you haven't already guessed, Edith Regelhoff plays the villainess, a greedy woman blinded by jealousy who spends most of the web novel trying to sabotage Eliza. At first, the idea of living as Edith doesn't seem so bad. If she can just be nice instead of nasty, she can spend the rest of her life living as a rich heiress daughter. Sounds a heck of a lot nicer than her past life, doesn't it? At least, it would have been. But her new family is almost as bad as the old one. You see, the web novel never bothered with Edith's background, but as soon as her memories sink, she uncovers the truth. From a young age, Edith was horribly mistreated by her father and elder brother, often beaten and locked up for days on end. Even the servants used to beat her. Within her own home, Edith was everybody's punching bag. But out in the real world, she was a walking advertisement for her family, always adorned with the most expensive jewels and dresses. So it's no wonder she became the villainess. Back in the present day, negotiations are still ongoing between the Rudwicks and Regelhoffs, who are trying to marry off their daughter to the richest family in the land. These two families have had a long-standing rivalry. After the war, Lord Rudwick became a hero and was made a duke. Ever since then, Count Regelhoff has been looking for a way to even the odds. So he decided to give Edith over as a bride and secretly use her to gain information and bring down the Rudwicks. It's a pretty miserable start to her new life, but Edith is determined to stay hopeful. All she has to do is act completely the opposite to how the original Edith would have. Accompanied by her father and elder brother, Edith makes her way inside the impressive Rudwick mansion, where her future in-laws are waiting for them. The most senior of the family are Axel and his wife Jocelyn Rudwick, the Duke and Duchess. Then there's the male lead, Cliff, who's just as handsome as the web novel described. Eliza, the actual protagonist, is also gorgeous, but the one who really takes her breath away is the man sitting next to her, Killian. Lucky for Edith, that's her future husband. It's a shame he doesn't seem as excited about her as she is about him. The two families sit down to a luxurious dinner. While Edith is focused on the food, tension begins to build between the two families as the Count raises his proposal of bringing at least 3 maids with Edith when she moves in. It's a slightly insensitive request, since it suggests that they don't think the Rudwick family maids will do a good job. But instead of backing up her father like they had planned, Edith does a complete 180 and tells the Duchess to ignore him, assuring her she doesn't need any extra help. Of course, she gets a big scolding from the Count on the way home, but Edith manages to talk her way out of it. She reminds him that their priority is to ease any suspicion, and bringing in a small army of maids isn't going to help that. Damn, she really is a smooth talker. Looks like the difficult experiences from her past life are already coming in handy when dealing with her family. For the next week, Edith strays the line between appeasing her father and her in-laws until eventually she arrives at the altar where we first began our tale. Killian looks miserable, but for once, Edith is delighted. After today, she won't have to put up with her awful family ever again. Everything is going well until it comes time to exchange the rings. Killian slips hers on in a few seconds, clearly hating the idea of touching her. But when it's his turn, Edith watches in horror as he slips it on himself. What a jerk! The guests start laughing, but Edith holds her head up high. So what if he hates her? She doesn't need to win his love, just a little tolerance. At least, enough tolerance that he won't end up murdering her like the original. That night, while preparing for bed, Edith is visited by a nervous-looking Eliza who has something to confess. Edith suddenly remembers this scene from the web novel. Eliza appears to apologize on behalf of Killian for being so rude and humiliating her at the wedding. As you probably guessed, Edith doesn't take it very well and instead gets angry at her for wearing white to her wedding. Which actually is a valid point. I literally thought that was a wedding dress at first. Of course, this time around, Edith needs to make friends with Eliza if she wants to survive in this house. And honestly, that's not going to be hard. I mean, she's so pretty and sweet. It's like she's impossible to hate. So Edith assures her there's no need to worry. Eliza compliments her for being so mature and kind in return. The villainess starts gushing about how pretty she is, even complimenting her dress. These two are going to be fast friends for sure. Once Eliza is gone, Edith can finally take a nice long bath. Her new life is shaping up to be pretty neat, so long as she can stay in the good graces of the Rudwick family and far away from her father. But just as she's starting to relax, Killian appears, making a comment about how rude she is to take a bath before her husband has arrived. You know what's even ruder? Not knocking before entering the bathroom. She's literally naked. Edith wasn't expecting her husband to visit at all. This definitely wasn't in the original story. Suddenly embarrassed, Edith explains that after his behavior at the wedding, she had no reason to think he would ever come to see her. When she asks if he's planning to spend the night, he suddenly acts all shy and storms out. Where did all that bravado disappear to? On his way out, Killian is caught by Eliza in the hallway, who asks what happened. She left with a good impression of her new sister-in-law, but Killian reminds her to be wary of the Riegelhoff family. He even uses Edith's wedding dress as an example of her character, calling it tasteless and vulgar. Is he kidding? That dress was such a slay! Eliza reacts badly to him, speaking so ill of his new wife. Just as Killian is about to confess something, his older brother Cliff appears, stealing the protagonist's attention. Interesting. So it seems the battle isn't strictly between these brothers. The next morning, Edith wakes up with a positive mindset. Even if her husband seems to be a lost cause, there's no reason she can't win over the other members of the Rudwick clan. The opinion of the Duke and Duchess is far more important than Killian's anyways. Starting small, she summons a maid to her chambers, hoping to make friends with those who are closest to her. The maid introduces herself as Anna, though she's quite withdrawn at first. Edith's gowns are all very revealing and tacky, so she asks Anna to adjust the chest area, if you know what I mean. She doesn't want to give the Duke and Duchess a heart attack at breakfast on her very first day. While Anna is adjusting the gowns, she thinks back on yesterday, how surprised she was to see Killian in the bathroom, especially while she was so exposed. No matter how handsome he is, Edith knows he's 100% devoted to Eliza. Of course, that doesn't stop her daydreaming about him while Anna does her hair. She goes to greet the lord and lady of the house, acting polite and making a good impression. The Duke asks her about the duties of a noble wife, and with the aid of Edith's memories, she's able to answer him perfectly. He's clearly suspicious of her still, but Edith knows the best route is to stay calm, collected, and offer to help in any way they want her to. That seems to go down better, and Edith leaves the meeting with the promise that she'll start her duties after 2 weeks, allowing her to settle down first. While taking a deep breath after the encounter, she meets Viscount Rhan Filch, the Duke's aide, who has been assigned to show her around the estate and teach her how it runs. Edith is a little nervous around him, since neither the Viscount nor Anna the maid are mentioned in the original, so she has no info on them. Rhan shows her around the jewelry exhibition room, the armory, and the grand library, which Edith is particularly impressed with. On their way back, they pass the Hall of Contests, from which they spot Eliza having tea with Killian and Cliff, who are both gazing at her like lovesick puppies. Oops, I don't think this will be the last time Edith catches her husband ogling his adopted sister. She can tell Rhan feels awkward, but it doesn't really bother Edith. She brushes the encounter aside and makes a casual comment about the garden before quickly moving them along. The kind of mature reaction that old Edith would never have given. After the tour, Rhan reports positively on her behavior to the Duke. He even says she seems much more dignified than the rumor suggested. However, Duke Rudwick isn't pleased to hear that Killian denied his orders and met up with Eliza straight after his wedding. I mean, it's not a good look, is it? Aside from, just generally respecting his new wife, they don't want to give her father, Count Riegelhoff, any reason to turn against them and align with their enemies like Duke Langston. But clearly, Killian doesn't care about all that. Not when it comes to Eliza, anyway. Meanwhile, Edith is once again trying to make friends with her maid Anna by giving her some time off over lunch. Finally alone, she has some space to think about her next move. Her mind starts to wander, and eventually she gets to the question of her death. What happened after her brother pushed her down those stairs? Did her parents cry at her funeral? She decides they probably didn't, and focuses her attention instead on this world's protagonist, Eliza, who is currently reading in the garden. While she watches, Killian approaches and asks about the book she's reading. Edith is about to turn away when Eliza asks her, scolding Killian for leaving his new wife alone all day. But he doesn't have an ounce of guilt. Instead, he tells her not to worry about Edith. She's just a hostage, and her position here is only temporary. Oh, that's not what you want to hear from your husband. Does that mean he's planning a divorce already? As if all of that wasn't dramatic enough, we then catch a scene from Eliza's original family, the Sinclairs. Their youngest daughter, Layla, is currently throwing a tantrum after finding out that Edith Riegelhoff married Killian. It seems like she has a grudge against Edith specifically, though it's not clear why. Her brother doesn't bat an eye at her awful behavior, but he does have some news to share. He encourages Layla to look at the big picture. What do two families like the Rudwicks and Riegelhoffs have to gain from this marriage? He paints a picture of the main factions currently vying for power in this empire. One party is Duke Langston, who wants the emperor's seat, and the imperial faction set against him, who only support the young emperor currently on the throne. With me so far? What do you think would happen if one of those two factions suddenly started producing weapons? Things could get ugly. And it just so happens that Count Riegelhoff has complete control over the distribution of iron ore, the main material necessary to produce weapons. As the leader of the Imperial faction, Duke Rudwick is desperate to keep Count Riegelhoff at his side. Because if he aligned with Duke Langston and provided him with all that iron, well, I think you guys can guess what comes next. War. So the question is, who's really controlling who? Riegelhoff, who just planted his daughter, aka his best spy inside the home of his greatest enemy, or Rudwick, who has her firmly in his grasp? Honestly, this all makes my head spin. Back at the Rudwick estate, Edith is too busy learning about her wifely duties to be worried about politics. While she and Eliza are looking over documents, the royal designer arrives to outfit the young ladies of the estate. The Duchess asks the girls to pick a few designs for her, and immediately Edith starts to sweat. No matter what she picks, Eliza will be the favorite. Isn't that just how the story goes? Even if she wasn't the protagonist, she's lived with the Duchess for 5 years. How's a new daughter-in-law supposed to have any idea about her style? Or any style in this made-up world? Just to make things even more stressful, Eliza has made her choice in seconds. And it's a good one. Even Edith agrees that the shade and shape of the gown would be a good fit for the Duchess. However, she does have an alternative. The royal designer approves of her choice, but will the Duchess? She's worried it's a little extravagant, and honestly, it kind of is. But despite her hesitation, the Duchess accepts both their choices and buys one dress from Eliza and one from Edith. That worked out better than I was expecting. After sorting herself, the Duchess starts looking for a design that would suit Eliza. Edith jumps straight in, genuinely happy to help. They can't help but shower the protagonist with compliments about her complexion and how anything would suit her lovely face. Several hours later, they've managed to narrow down the choices. Just. When it finally comes time for Edith to choose, she insists that she doesn't need a new dress, but she does need a whole host of alterations on the skimpy ones she brought with her. Luckily, the royal designer agrees to take on her revealing wardrobe. Edith gives her detailed instructions on which designs to remove, which she should keep, and which need to be covered up a little more. This will be a big step in changing her public image. Maybe if she starts dressing more formally, the rumors about her personality will start to quiet down. Finally, the dressmaker leaves and Edith is free to head back to her own room. But once again, Killian is lurking outside. Come to stir up some trouble, no doubt. He doesn't even say hello, just orders her to follow him for tea time with Eliza. Why does he have to make everything seem so serious? It's pretty obvious that Eliza told him to fetch her, probably because she wants the newlyweds to spend some more time together. Unfortunately, that plan backfires when Killian warns her that Eliza is more precious to him than a vulgar woman like Edith. Jeez, does this guy have any manners? Killian seems surprised that his words have taken effect, as he thinks she's more snake than human. For once, Edith doesn't just laugh it off, and asks how he'd react if she spoke to Eliza the same way he just spoke to her. Although she makes her feelings clear, she doesn't kick up a fuss, doesn't storm off or cause a scene. She simply walks away like a girl boss, ready to greet innocent little Eliza with a bright smile. Cliff is there too, though he's only slightly less rude than his brother. Things very quickly turn into a fight for Eliza's affections. Both brothers try to convince the other to go on some kind of trip so that they can keep their adopted sister for themselves. It gets even more awkward when Cliff asks for Edith's opinion. Does she want Cliff to go away, leaving her stuck as the uncomfortable third wheel between Killian and Eliza? Damn, he sure is sly. He even goes so far as to openly announce that she'd be stuck in the middle between them. Are these guys really the romantic leads? Because at this point, they seem like the real villains, not Edith. Fortunately, she's getting used to these kind of comments by now. Edith just says she doesn't care. Since he's the heir to the Rudwick family, he can do whatever he wants. But she does point out that a tour of the territory like he suggested would be exhausting for someone like Eliza. Besides, the two of them aren't married. Wouldn't that be a little scandalous? Boom! She knows all the right things to say. For a moment, she catches Eliza giving a very sneaky little smirk. But in a heartbeat, it disappears, and she's back to her adorable, childish persona. Wait, is she hiding something? Later that night, Eliza finds Killian out on the terrace, still trying to wrap his head around Edith's clever comebacks earlier that day. She's not behaving at all how he expected, and he's even more surprised to find out that she didn't ask for a single dress when the royal designer came to visit. That's completely out of character for Edith of Rumor. He can't make sense of it, and instead decides it must have been arrogance, that none of the dresses were up to her standard, so that's why she refused. Ugh, it's like he's determined to make her a villain. Despite everything, he can't get her out of his head, especially the way she looked on their wedding night, if you know what I mean. He assures Edith that she's nothing but a snake. As soon as they drop their guard, that's when she'll strike. The next morning, Edith is informed by her maid that she's running out of perfume. Since her position is still so uncertain, she's been secretly saving up money in case of emergencies. Deciding to splash out, she invites a perfume artisan to the home to offer her a new one. Unfortunately, things don't go exactly how she was expecting. The perfume artisan offers her some of the finest scents he has to offer, including some rose scents similar to her previous style. But when it comes time to mention the price, Edith nearly has a stroke. For a tiny bottle of scent, it would be 200,000 coins. And it's not even that different to her old one. This guy must be a fraud. Flustered by the price, Edith decides to stick with her old perfume, taking on a suggestion to add a slightly deeper rose scent to what she already has. That makes it a little cheaper, but Edith still tries to cut a bargain. She makes the excuse that she doesn't want to spend a lot of money when she just got married, and promises to call him again when she needs a refill. I don't think that's the way things work in this world, bestie. But the artisan doesn't want to offend the lady of such a noble family, so he has little choice but to take the deal. Despite her success, Edith is left feeling defeated. She only bought the perfume, a blush, and a brush, and it cost her 150,000 coins. Turns out the money she's been saving isn't worth as much as she had hoped. That's what they don't tell you about rich families. The more money you have, the more expensive things get. Of course, there are also things that money can't buy, like priceless works of art. Edith's favorite part of Rhanan's tour was the Sistine Hall, which is basically like having her very own art museum at home. As always, Edith's peaceful afternoon is interrupted by her husband. Apparently, he has nothing better to do with his time than follow her around making snide comments. Contrary to his assumptions, Edith is genuinely interested in the art, especially a piece depicting a male soldier at war. According to Killian, it was made to commemorate his grandfather's victory against a neighboring kingdom. He asks about her favorite artists, but Edith isn't embarrassed to admit she doesn't know any. They both know her family aren't exactly the cultured type. She catches sight of another painting, this one depicting a young man who looks suspiciously like Killian. Clearly, he didn't have much choice in the matter. A painter who was close to his father requested to use him as a model, even though he's, well, a little exposed in the picture. Edith enjoys teasing him, taking a good look at the painting before moving on, apparently disappointed with what was on display. Killian, whose ego is far bigger than his other parts, flies off the handle, trying to claim he was only the model for the face, not the body. Sure, buddy. Whatever helps you sleep at night. As the weeks pass, Edith relaxes more and more. She's adjusting well to her new life of luxury, happily living in the background while the main plot rages on. The estate is an endless sort of pleasure, what with its sprawling gardens, stunning art galleries, and delicious dishes at every meal. People still treat her with suspicion, but Anna is always kind. Plus, she's quite friendly with Rhan, even though he's still monitoring her to report back to the Duke. Every morning, Edith finishes up her walk right in front of the training grounds, with a convenient view overlooking the two shirtless heirs to the Rudwick family exchanging blows. She's so relatable. If I were her, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. She really is shameless, but I guess she has the right to stare at every inch of her shirtless husband. But the more she's been watching him the last 2 months, the harder it's become to tolerate his obsession with Eliza. In her past life as Choi Soo-na, she never had the experience of crushing on someone like this. All Choi Soo-na did was work, and she was hoping to use those skills to make her work as Edith a little easier. She experiments with a pretty basic table format for the household documents. I guess this world doesn't use that style of documentation because Eliza takes one look at it and says it's a little awkward to read. Seeing how she looks discouraged, the Duchess comes over for an update. And for some reason, Eliza claims she was teaching Edith, not the other way around. I knew it. Miss Goody Two-Shoes isn't all she pretends to be. It's just like in her past life, where others would tell her superiors at work that she was inadequate. Refusing to be bulldozed twice, Edith asks the Duchess directly to look over her table format and give her opinion. While she's explaining it, she suddenly second-guesses herself, wondering if she accidentally mistook Eliza's intentions and made her look bad. But it's too late for that now, because the Duchess loves it. She's so impressed that she decides to organize all of their information that way from now on. Delighted, Edith forgets all about her bump with Eliza. Is anyone else a little lost? I just can't figure this girl out. Is she pretending to play nice, or is Edith just being paranoid? Later that day, the Duchess is singing Edith's praises to her husband, showing him the new format she invented and calling her smart. Even Killian is impressed, albeit reluctantly. In a moment, the Duchess asks him to consider how difficult this marriage is for Edith. After all, they both know it's just for political gain, but she's the one who had to move to a house full of strangers who all suspect her of spying. So she asks him to show a little more compassion. But before Killian can snap back like he usually does, Rhan interrupts. While the Duchess shows him their new table format, Killian approaches Eliza, asking what she thinks about Edith's new system. She agrees with the Duchess. Edith is proving to be very smart. In fact, Eliza seems a little insecure since she didn't grow up with the same high-class education as her sister-in-law, and always learns at a slower pace. See? This is exactly what I'm saying! Like, does she actually feel bad or is she playing the victim? I just can't tell. Obviously, whatever she's doing works a charm on Killian. Seeing how she's acting funny only makes him more convinced that Edith is bad news. He even starts to doubt whether she was playing dumb in the gallery earlier. His suspicions growing once again, he visits his wife early next morning. Edith is delighted to see him. Although she mocks him, it's more like flirting than bullying. She can't seem to help herself, and can you blame her? He's a handsome, moody man with a great physique. He's practically begging to be teased. Frantically trying to guess what he's come to complain about this time, she realizes Eliza must have been upset after their interaction. She tries to lighten the mood by talking about the weather, but Killian doesn't take the bait. He slams the door she's trying to open, suddenly trapping her between him and the glass. Whoop! I was not expecting that! He leans down, uncomfortably close, making Edith blush. He accuses her of turning her nose up at the royal designer, acting too good for the seamstress who outfits his mother and adopted sister. Now Edith is confused. Things were getting steamy, so why is he suddenly talking about clothes? She used to be known as the girl who never wore the same dress twice, so of course he doesn't believe that she didn't want the new dress. Assuming she's just stuck up, he offers to take her to a different boutique and arrange a new wardrobe for her somewhere else instead. Understandably, Edith doesn't take that very well. She shoves him aside, telling him he doesn't know anything about her and accusing him of finding any excuse to hate her. Which is 100% correct, let's be honest. Killian is shocked. She hasn't snapped once the entire time they've been together, no matter how much he's mocked her. She reminds him that he's not the only victim in this situation. It's not her fault they're stuck in a loveless marriage. Killian suddenly smirks. He points out that her family are the ones threatening his, and that's when she realizes he doesn't see her as Edith. To Killian, she's just another Regelhoff. They can't separate her from her family's reputation and the history of animosity between them. Suddenly, her confidence disappears. She gives him a sad smile and says once again that he knows nothing about her. When Killian walks away with his usual warning, she curls up in a ball. Maybe she can't relax happily in the background after all. Thankfully, Killian isn't enough of a jerk to walk away feeling proud of himself. He lingers in the corridor, wondering why he said all those stupid things. He was having a little trouble focusing, considering the way she was dressed and her rose-scented perfume. But he also realized at the same time as his wife that he's never seen her as her own person. Everything he knows about her is in some way related to her father, and so she hasn't proved any of his suspicions. The whole situation is giving him a headache. While his head is still pounding, Eliza appears bright and smiley as always. She can tell at once that something is wrong and touches his forehead to check his temperature, giving him a whiff of her scent, violets. It's the polar opposite to his wife's rose perfume, which he calls disgusting in comparison. And just like that, his hatred of Edith is renewed. Ugh, this guy is such a child, I swear! Edith, on the other hand, is a big enough person to get over their argument and head outside for some fun. She hasn't had much chance to leave the mansion so far, so she doesn't really know her way around. Luckily, Anna is a great guide and mentions a famous bakery named Peridot, which is notoriously difficult to visit before they sell out each day. Instead, Edith asks for a jewelry shop, ideally one where she can sell the gemstones removed from her old dresses. Anna is basically a walking encyclopedia and has a different option for every occasion, so she confidently leads her to a well-established jeweler's where they exchange her ornaments for cash. Then they head to a bank to deposit her earnings into an account with a fake name. This girl is not just here to mess around, she's making money moves. Her fight with Killian served as a reminder that she could be kicked out at any time, so it's only sensible to have a little stash of her own cash out of the Rudwick's reach. With all the boring chores out of the way, they head to a restaurant for lunch. Hoping to gain important information for her potential escape, she asks Anna about the means of transportation available to common people in this world. It's not like she can just get an Uber and skedaddle. She can't ask too much, or else Anna will report it back to the Duke. When they return to the mansion, she does some research on her own in the library, just in case she ever ends up poor and starving in the wilderness or something. Anna returns a little later to announce that the Duchess is looking for her. Apparently, the jeweler has arrived. Uh-oh, here comes another scene from the original. You see, in the web novel, this day marked an episode where Edith was humiliated in front of Eliza. The jeweler in question, whose name is Apart, visits the Rudwick estate every season. In the original, Cliff, Killian, and the Duchess only focused on Eliza, encouraging her to try on necklace after necklace while Edith just kind of sat there. Eliza tried to offer a simple one to Edith, who was offended by her pick and called her tasteless. Because, of course she did. She was pretty stupid for a villainess. In the end, Cliff bought every piece, leaving her with only the necklace Eliza had recommended. This time around, things start in much the same way, with the Rudwicks doting on their darling daughter. When the time comes for Eliza to recommend a necklace, she picks a simple but very pretty chain with a ruby. Edith actually really likes it and reaches to try it on, at just the same time as Killian. He silently takes the chain and unhooks it, ordering her a little harshly to turn around so that he can fit it. Is it just me, or is this kind of hot? He must be playing nice because the Duchess is watching. He even offers to buy it for her, allowing Cliff to show off and take the rest. The Duchess steps in and tries to encourage Edith to take another necklace, but she politely declines. Later that evening, she's going through the mail in her bedroom when she finds a letter from her father. It's basically a warning not to get too comfortable, reminding her that she's meant to be feeding him information. He heard that they're allowing her to work with important documents, so he demands she steal anything that mentions weaponry and hand it over. Wait, but how did he find that out in the first place? It's not interesting enough to be a rumor, so that means he must have another spy on the inside. In her response, Edith plays up the Rudwick's strength, warning her father not to start a fight with them and asking him to reconsider his position against the imperial throne. Of course, one letter alone isn't going to convince him, but at least it will get her off the hook about helping him start a rebellion. Unfortunately, that one little letter ends up causing more trouble than she could have imagined. It doesn't end up in her father's hands, but the Duke's. Duke Rudwick summons her to his office for something like an interrogation, asking outright if she leaked private documents to her father, the Count. Edith swears she's innocent, but they don't believe her. At the Duke's command, Rhan hands over a stack of documents that she was given the responsibility of organizing. It turns out they contain false information, and recently, the Count has been purchasing only the items that appear on those fake documents. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Edith calmly insists that she didn't pass on any information. She points out that she's not the only person who had access to those documents. There's a whole chain of people who work in the same office who could have easily peeked at her pile. But that makes it look like she's trying to blame the Duke's own family, which does not work in her favor. He calls her name angrily, but uses the last name Regelhoff. Boldly, Edith argues that they never call Eliza Sinclair, so why is she the only one not allowed to use the Rudwick name? Oh girl, she's playing with fire now! As if that wasn't far enough, she accuses him outright of framing her so that he has a valid excuse to take action against the Count. It's maybe not the smartest move she could have made, but you can't blame her for being emotional when she's cornered. No matter how hard she's worked to reverse her reputation and change the story, things have happened just the same way they did in the original. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's not possible to change her ending, and she's destined to live out Edith's miserable life as a villainess. Well, until Killian kills her. Let's hope at least she can change that bit. Edith wipes her tears and lifts her head. She's already sworn on her name and her honor. If they're still so sure she did it, they might as well just take her head. Obviously, they're not going to do that. Not right now, anyway. For now, she'll be placed under constant surveillance, which Killian decides to undertake himself. Storming out of the room with his wife in hand, he calls her crazy for talking back to his father. His nickname on the battlefield was literally Sudden Guillotine, and she just asked him to behead her. You have to give her points for bravery at least. Edith doesn't have any faith in the Rudwick's idea of justice, but surprisingly, Killian promises to be fair in his investigation, regardless of his personal suspicions. While Edith is trapped in her room, life goes on as normal for Eliza. On a visit to the palace with Cliff, she meets Princess Catherine Iberia, the only blood relative of the current emperor. She's the most selfish and reckless princess in the history of the imperial family. Kind of like a crazy teenager with no one to keep her in check. She only behaves herself around Eliza, and sometimes listens to Cliff as well. Princess Catherine asks about Killian, who is notably absent, and his brother explains the whole political marriage situation. That's actually why they've come to the Imperial Palace, to talk to the Emperor about the growing political tension between the factions. Catherine snatches Eliza and tells Cliff to buzz off if he's going to be so serious. Okay, I know she's the resident troublemaker, but does anyone else think Catherine is kind of a girl boss? In a complete change of scene, we get a flashback from Cui Suna's childhood when she was seriously ill and stuck in hospital. She had a disease that required treatment using bone marrow, and even though her brother was a match, he refused to donate his because of the pain. She was miserable, unhappy with her family and her fate, and wanted to hurry up and succumb to her disease already. But another girl in her ward reminded her to be grateful for even the small things, like the fact that she had a family and a potential donor in the first place. Back in the web novel world, Edith wakes up crying. She ended up leaving that hospital without ever saying goodbye, and although she regrets it, she has never once taken her life or health for granted because of that girl. Wow, I mean, we knew her backstory was tragic, I just didn't realize quite how tragic. Once she's come back to her senses, Edith decides to tackle her troubles with a new mindset. As long as she's alive and healthy, there's always hope. Of course, it's hard to relax now that Killian is around all the time, being even more moody and unresponsive than usual. He reluctantly updates her on the case and informs her that even Eliza is a suspect at the moment. Frankly, Edith isn't too bothered. She's too focused on enjoying her delicious meal. Killian seems exasperated by her, but at least he offers her his soup. Somewhere deep down, there's hope for these two as well. I just know it. After he leaves, Edith is bored again, so she decides to pick up a hobby. Apparently, making clothes for wooden dolls is popular these days, so she asks Anna to go and buy her the necessary materials and tells her to keep whatever is left over as compensation for her hard work. The maid gets all flustered and tries to refuse, but Edith says it's a token of her appreciation and insists. Dedicated as always, Anna brings back only the best supplies and materials for her to use, which seems like a sign that they've become a bit closer. This new hobby is more difficult than Edith anticipated, but let's be honest, she doesn't have much else to do while she's under investigation, so she might as well give it a go. Even now, while under house arrest, she's more relaxed than she ever was in her past life. After a few more tries, she successfully makes a little Edith doll and a Killian doll and leaves them kissing on her nightstand. See? She's just like us! Of course, even moments of peace don't last long for our villainess. The next day, Killian bursts into her bedroom announcing that her handwritten letter has been discovered. Uh-oh. Do you think they'll take her up on that offer for her head now? Before we find out what that whole mess is about, we cut to a scene between the awful Sinclair siblings. Layla is delighted to hear that Edith has been on probation since the marriage, and that her correspondence with the Count has been exposed. Her brother also seems amused. He thinks the Regelhoffs have been sloppy because they plan to move against the Duke and the Imperialist faction as soon as possible. That must be why he's been pressuring his daughter for information so early. Obviously, since the Duke didn't actually trust Edith with any real information, it appears they've both been caught in a perfectly laid trap. At this point, I'm wondering how the heck this kid has so much information from inside the Rudwick estate. How many spies can there be in one mansion? He even knows that Killian has been looking out for Edith, something his own family aren't even aware of. Anyway, the only thing that the Sinclairs really care about now is Eliza, specifically whether their illegitimate sister will marry Cliff, the heir to the Rudwick name. You see, Layla is still set on marrying Killian someday, assuming that this whole mess with Edith ends in a divorce, or even a beheading. But if Eliza solidifies her position as Duchess, there's no way they'll let Layla into the family. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't do that anyway, but the delusional Layla is still doing her best to scheme her way in. She comes up with a plan to use Edith to get rid of Eliza, hoping to turn the sisters-in-law against one another and let Edith solve the problem on her own. That's because they still think this Edith is the moody, selfish villainess of the past. Even if she was like that, I'm honestly not sure she's going to be around long enough to take a stand against Eliza. Speaking of our leading lady, she's just heard the news about a handwritten letter. Killian, clearly panicking, asks how the heck she's going to wriggle her way out of this one, and she replies that she'll tell the Duke she's being framed. Yeah, because that tactic worked so well for you last time, bestie. Rhan interrupts to announce that Edith has been summoned to the Duke's office. They present her with a list of transactions requested by Count Regelhoff, written in what appears to be Edith's handwriting. It is very similar, but obviously she didn't do it. Trying to find a flaw, she compares the forgery with her real handwritten documents, pointing out the difference in her formatting. However, it's clear that whoever made this fake does know something about accounting and finances, which once again raises the odds that it was made by either Eliza or the Duchess, who are familiar with both her table grids and penmanship. She has Rhan fetch her personal diary for a closer comparison. After analyzing a subtle difference between her letters, the Duke seems almost convinced. That's when Eliza appears. She was summoned by the Duke for questioning and confirms that the only people who have even seen the table grid method are herself, the Duchess, and the heirs, Killian and Cliff. Great! So now the only culprits other than Edith are the Rudwicks themselves. That doesn't put Edith in the best position now, does it? The Duke then dismisses her, clearly satisfied. Edith implores him to pay attention to the evidence in front of him, rather than just Eliza's word, but he doesn't seem to care. It's at this point that Edith realizes she can't really remember how this played out in the original. It was Eliza who revealed the truth in the web novel, but now she's not really doing anything. She didn't say anything to condemn Edith, and hasn't tried to vouch for her either. Isn't that kind of sus? I mean, what reason does she have to doubt her? In the end, neither the evidence nor Eliza's testimony is conclusive, so the Duke decides to drop the charges, but not his suspicion. Dissatisfied, Edith storms back to her bedroom with Killian in tow. He's still trying to make excuses for why no one can trust her, but it's all about her family. Edith has told him time and time again that she has no interest in the conflict between the Regelhoffs and Rudwicks, but he can't seem to let it go. Mainly because he knows for certain that she helped her father with his schemes in the past. That she can't deny. It's an open secret that Edith has seduced men for information, ruined parties, and even ruined marriages. So yeah, she has kind of been a force for chaos. Frustrated that she can't explain the truth, Edith falls silent and walks back to her room. Out in the hallway, Eliza runs up to Killian, acting all confused and innocent about the interrogation earlier. I'm sorry, I don't know about you guys, but I straight up don't believe her anymore. How can she act like she didn't know Edith was under investigation? Even the Sinclairs found out. Edith is eavesdropping from behind closed doors, half hoping that Killian will stand up for her. But her husband is too busy thinking about what he read in her diary earlier. All those thirsty thoughts she's been having about him, all those times she watched him train. Yeah, now he knows everything. Killian, being Killian, can't wrap his head around the idea that Edith actually finds him attractive. While he's training to clear his mind, Edith visits the Duchess, hoping to convince her that she didn't steal those documents. Turns out the Duchess is the one person she doesn't have to prove herself to. She's seen how hard she works in the office, how hard she's been trying to adapt, so she believes her. Aw, that's so heartbreaking. Edith starts to cry. For the first time, she feels like she can let her guard down. She's even about to tell the Duchess about the abuse she suffered back home, but suddenly she loses consciousness and collapses. The boys, who simply cannot train with their shirts on, are notified at once. Killian sprints to his wife, currently tucked up in bed under the care of the Rudwick family doctor. Unsurprisingly, the lead culprit is stress. The doctor basically gives them a slap on the wrist and tells them to treat her better and give her a chance to rest. Too right. Killian feels guilty, not only because of the impact of the investigation, but he can tell she's been crying by her puffy face. After his mother explains what they were talking about before she fainted, he feels even worse. The only person who believed her was the Duchess. She just wanted to hear that someone, even just one person, actually trusted her. And all Killian has done this entire time is emphasize how vulgar and suspicious she is. You know, honestly, I'm glad he feels bad. It kind of seems like he's gonna faint himself, but then Eliza arrives and he's overcome with affection once again. This man just can't seem to make up his mind. On the one hand, he wants her to touch him, but then he grabs her before she can do so. While he's having a crisis of the heart, Edith is experiencing something a little strange. Alone in the dark, back in her old body, she sees a notification screen pop up. It warns her of 3 rules necessary for her journey through this web novel. The first is that she can't reveal things which would otherwise be secret according to the original plot. Well, that explains why she passed out with such perfect timing. As if that wasn't irritating enough, the screen doesn't display any of the other rules before throwing her back through time and space into Edith's consciousness. Why do they always have to be so vague? She wakes up in her bedroom with a gasp, 2 whole days after her first collapsing. To test the theory, she tries to tell Anna about Edith's abuse and suddenly feels a stabbing pain in her chest. That's when the truth comes crashing down. No matter how hard she tries, the original plot keeps repeating itself. The same events keep happening, almost as if she has no real power over how the story progresses. Does that mean she's destined for the same fate as Edith? Death by handsome husband? As if all that wasn't bad enough, the next episode has her kissing Killian while he sleeps in an attempt to seduce him. What? Don't tell me she's going to give in and start acting like the real Edith? Dejected and hopeless, Edith walks like a zombie to her husband's room. He looks just as handsome while he's asleep. Actually, maybe even more so. Edith knows he doesn't love her, that he thinks she's disgusting, untrustworthy, and cheap. So she decides to prove it. It may sound crazy, but this way she can accept her fate. This way she might feel like she deserves it and become mentally prepared for the ending that awaits her. She leans down and gently plants a kiss on his forehead, which, I don't know about you guys, but I think that's just adorable. She's gonna have to work a lot harder if she wants him to detest her. Just as she expected, Killian suddenly wakes up and grabs her wrist. It seems like his suspicions have been confirmed. She can't control herself, and finally she's come to prove it. In a wild move, he throws her to the bed, calling her bluff and pinning her beneath him. Oh my gosh, is this actually happening? He's making all these comments about whether she'll be able to satisfy him, all while unbuttoning his shirt. Let's be honest, Edith isn't exactly going to say no after thirsting after him for all this time. But she feels like this is wrong. Does he really want to do this with someone he hates so much? Killian hesitates for barely a second before grabbing her chin. She doesn't have the right to ask questions, he says. Not after sneaking into his bedroom in the middle of the night. Suddenly, he kisses her deeply. He places her hand on his chest. The chest she's been staring at every morning in the training grounds. It's at this exact moment that Edith remembers that he read her diary and turns bright red. Honestly, I don't know how she wasn't blushing already. Things get steamy real fast. I don't think I have to tell you guys what happens next. For the first time since their marriage, Edith wakes up next to her husband the next morning, still in a state of disbelief. But what happens next is even more surprising. Instead of coldly turning her away, Killian runs her a bath and literally carries her to it. I guess Edith must be really, really good at her job, if you know what I mean. His wife is just as shocked as we are. She was certain he would hate her after last night, especially since that was his first kiss. Well, his first everything. Edith's seduction never worked on him in the original novel. Could he just not control himself? Oh, my head is spinning. Is it just me or is it hot in here? Edith is still thinking about their passionate affair the following day. After their first night together, another notification revealed itself, announcing that the required conditions for the first stage have been met. I don't have the faintest idea what that means, but apparently Edith has been doing something right. The notification provides some more, very vague information, but the gist of it is that she has to try and stick to the original story as much as possible. If she completes the secret conditions required of her, then the authority of the author will slowly be diminished and she can act more freely, maybe even breaking some of the rules. She's already completed one. The question is, how much freedom did she win? How can she even test it? Right now, that doesn't matter. The main thing she's gained from that steamy experience, other than an incredible night with her handsome husband, is that her fate can be changed. Let's face it, she'd have to mess up pretty badly at this point to still get strangled by Killian. That doesn't mean she's out of danger, but there's hope. Trying to continue with her life as usual, Edith visits the Duchess the next day and apologizes for worrying her. The Duke and his wife recently took a trip to the Imperial Palace, probably to discuss the ongoing tensions with Duke Langston and the Count. Luckily, it sounds like the Duke felt guilty after hearing about her collapse, so she's not in any more trouble. But she is in a slightly odd position. Everyone will be watching her next steps, still keeping one eye on her. With that in mind, Edith wants to continue working for the Duchess under one condition. She wants to be supervised directly by someone the Duchess trusts, so that she can't be framed again. Fortunately, Viscount Rhan is in need of an assistance these days. At first, Edith is hesitant about working with him. Although he's one of the few people who doesn't hold her family name against her, he was incredibly cold during the investigation and never spoke up on her behalf. But then again, who did? In the end, Edith agrees to work under the Viscount. She reports to his office that same afternoon, where he greets her with his usual level of enthusiasm. Which is none, if you were wondering. She's got a big task ahead of her. The last guy in her position made a fuss and completely messed up their filing system, so now it's her job to reorganize the receipts he was given. She gets to work right away, kind of enjoying the quiet, studious atmosphere in Rhan's office. The time passes by quicker than she expects, and at the end of the day, he praises her for her hard work. That evening, Cliff, Killian, and Eliza invite Rhan to give them a report during dinner, which is kind of mean if you ask me. At least let the man sit down and have some food. Somehow, Cliff already found out about him supervising Edith. It seems like he wants to hear only the bad things and laugh about how incompetent his sister-in-law is. Fortunately for Killian, who seems uncomfortable, Rhan won't oblige. They only worked together for half a day. What could he possibly have seen in that time that would make him suspicious? She worked hard, did her job, and didn't accept any compliments at the end. There's nothing to nitpick. Cliff seems a little disappointed, but he doesn't let it show. He promises to call Rhan again in the future and warns him not to let his guard down with Edith in the future. After he leaves, Eliza points out how complimentary Rhan was. He doesn't dish out praise to any old person, so apparently the only natural conclusion is that Rhan has a crush on her. Not like she just did what she was told and genuinely impressed him. Cliff seems to enjoy making his brother uncomfortable, even speaking openly about the idea of Rhan and Edith getting hitched. Does no one in this household understand what marriage means? Killian still seems bothered by their conversation later on. Distracted, he heads to Edith's room, where the door has been left open just enough to carry the scent of rose petals into the hall. And we know how Killian feels about rose petals. There's no one inside, so he steps into the room and finds the dolls of Edith and Killian kissing on her nightstand. Well, we all saw that coming, didn't we? Edith appears a second too late, knocking the dolls on the floor. Killian sternly tells her to hide them in future, and then the two sit down to catch up like a real married couple. They talk about Rhan, how he grew up on the Rudwick's estate from the young age and was once close with Killian. He then announces that he's heading down to check out the Rhan estate, one of the Duke's estates which is several days' journey from the capital. This is the territory which will be given to Killian once his brother becomes the Duke, so he has to take good care of it. All that is expected. What Edith doesn't expect is him asking her to come along. She's so surprised that Edith thinks he must be joking. Too embarrassed to ask again, Killian heads out straight away, storming off like a baby. Ugh, when will these two start taking each other seriously? Once her husband has left, Edith gets back to her job with Rhan. He tells her to visit the Duchess after she's finished, which doesn't take long. Rhan has been constantly impressed with her speed and dedication when it comes to organizing documents. People still can't seem to believe she's more than just a pretty face. The Duchess summons both her daughters to announce that Countess Hermione is hosting a bazaar next month. To prepare for the event, she invites them both to an embroidery gathering. Bells are already ringing in Edith's mind. The Bazaar of Countess Hermione was a big episode in the original web novel. Bazaars are hosted by noble ladies to raise funds for charitable causes, and one of the most popular items to contribute is an embroidered piece made by noble wives. These kind of events become something of a competition. It's common for women to gather and create their pieces together, which is bad news for Edith. Eliza is talented, but her sister-in-law is a disaster when it comes to sewing. Meanwhile, Killian has arrived at the estate, which will soon be his home. It's in pretty good condition and not too far away from the capital, with the potential for trade and new industries to grow. But the Duke is suspicious. He asks his son if this is really all he wants, if he can be satisfied with an estate out in the countryside instead of the chance to become a Duke. Which is kind of unfair if you ask me. Like, Killian doesn't have a choice. His brother is the heir, not him, so why is he even asking him that question? Killian is frustrated but keeps quiet and tells his father he is content with what he has. I feel like that's going to come up again at some point. Back in the city, the Countess's bazaar has begun. There are sweets, jewelry, and of course, the embroidered pieces. Eliza's has already been chosen because, of course it has. As if Cliff would let anybody else take his beloved's handmade token. While walking through the stalls, the girls overhear some nasty women gossiping about Eliza and how she came from a lower-class background. Edith stands up for her, loudly answering that she doesn't even recognize those people, so their opinion is irrelevant. Ouch! The women openly criticize Edith for being obnoxious and call Eliza some very rude names, until Edith finally puts a stop to the back and forth by threatening to tell Cliff what they've said. Finally, people like that are never brave enough to talk to your face. At just the perfect moment, Killian arrives back from his travels. Edith almost says she missed him, but manages to control herself while they catch up. The event seems to be going well, and everyone is calm. Until Edith goes to the bathroom and is suddenly grabbed by a stranger on her way out. Why can't she ever just have a normal afternoon? To our protagonist, this man is a stranger, but it turns out he and Edith are already acquainted. Very well acquainted. This is Shane Riegelhoff, her older brother who is totally loyal to her father. He starts asking all these questions about the letter and the fake document they received with the list of weapons and materials to purchase. The family were shocked when she told them to back off and stay away from the Rudwicks. Shane assumes she was being watched and sent the letter as a dummy to avoid suspicion. So Edith decides to correct him and to ask about the document that was used to frame her. Shane is convinced she was the one who sent it, but that's not true. If it came from the Rudwick estate, then she really was framed by one of the Duke's people. But who could have fooled both families so flawlessly? Back at the bazaar, Killian is starting to get suspicious over his wife's sudden absence. Catching sight of Eliza, he wonders if Edith got offended and stormed off because she wasn't the center of attention. He still doesn't know his wife very well, does he? Though he was surprised to see her stand up for Eliza in front of those gossiping nobles. People had plenty to say about Edith as well, but she paid them no mind. just like Killian does when the nearby ladies comment on how handsome and well-mannered he is. See, they're actually a pretty good match when it comes to ignoring other people. At least neither of them care what society thinks. He ventures to the bathrooms and finds Edith in the middle of a very tense conversation with her brother. He can't quite catch what they're saying, but it's clear they're not on the same page. After Shane storms off, Killian comes out of hiding and Edith pretends she was just taking a look around the mansion. They walk slowly back through the gardens, where she thanks him for coming all the way out to find her. It's nice to have someone who notices when she disappears for once. By the time they return to the bazaar, the event is over. Even Edith's plain little handkerchief was bought. Earlier that day, the Duchess came and told Killian that his wife had him in mind while she was sewing it. The bird is exactly the same color as his eyes. Isn't that cute? Killian made all kinds of excuses, but let's be honest, that cold heart of his is starting to melt. That's why he bought it. As if Edith hasn't had her fill of drama for the day, Shane returns to cause another scene as they're trying to leave. He puts on a show, claiming the whole family has been worried about her since she left the Regelhof estate. One of her previous maids even starts crying and screaming, begging to be taken back to the Rudwick mansion with her. Poor Edith. She thought she'd finally escape from all this, but now Shane is trying to tighten the leash around her neck. Unfortunately, Killian decides to be merciful at just the wrong time and agrees to take on Sophia, the new maid. She tries to tell him the truth, but that stupid rule keeps her from protesting. I guess having Sophia as her maid is a necessary part of the plot. Taking advantage of her chest pains, she leads Edith back to her bedroom and threatens her violently. She treats Edith like a stray dog, reminding her who she belongs to. Oh no, why do I get the feeling all her hard work is about to go to waste? Clearly, this is how Edith's life used to be, suffering abuse from her maids and family alike. Sophia starts beating her, making sure to hit all the places where a bruise wouldn't be seen. She's truly evil. Why would a maid be so loyal to a house like the Regelhofs anyway? As Edith points out, the Emperor is in a far stronger position with the Duke Rudwick at his back. Can't the Regelhofs see they're on the losing side? Sophia seems totally convinced that Archduke Langston will successfully usurp the throne and become the new emperor. But even if he does, what will happen to the rest of them? Does she really think Count Regelhof will care about a maid after he becomes a duke? Sophia doesn't take kindly to that at all. She gives her mistress a vicious kick and reminds her to stay in her lane. After all, now that she's become Edith's personal maid, she could kill her any time. The next day, Edith is exhausted at work. Not only has Sophia been beating her, but she also stole her meals. If Edith wants a proper meal, she'll have to prove herself useful to the Regelhofs again. When Edith tried to talk back, she got treated even worse. This is actually so heartbreaking. I didn't know this series would get so dark. Even in her previous life, our protagonist never had to suffer this kind of treatment. It makes her sad to think of how many years the real Edith was suffering like this. It's no wonder she became a villain. Strangely, thinking of Edith gives her the strength to carry on and continue resisting the evil Sophia. She sneaks a few desserts at work with Rhan, who is kind enough to let her have them all. But that brief respite is soon snatched away when he goes on a business trip. Now Edith has no way to eat. Sophia is taking all her meals for her, and Killian hasn't been coming to eat with her lately. Did he seriously believe that drama with Shane? He's such an idiot sometimes. Heading out for some fresh air, Edith gets stopped by Eliza and Killian, who invite her to tea and cake. Little do they know, Sophia is listening in, and she has one heck of a grudge against Eliza. In case you were still wondering why she's so loyal to the Regelhof family, it turns out she's head over heels in love with Shane. When she was back at the old estate, she found out that he had feelings for Eliza. Now every time she sees the girl, it makes her blood boil. This is going to end in tears, I can already tell. In the end, Edith said no to the tea party invite. She's pretty sure Sophia will make her vomit everything she eats outside her room, so she doesn't see the point. Jeez, we seriously need to get rid of this Sophia girl ASAP! To her surprise, she comes in a moment later with a piece of the pie Eliza had offered. Since she doesn't want the others to get suspicious, she says she'll let Edith eat just this once. Yeah, right. This is too good to be true. Edith is so hungry that she doesn't think twice. Only a few minutes later, she's on the floor coughing up blood. Looks like Sophia found a way to get back at Eliza and her mistress at the same time. She starts screaming for help, making a huge commotion while Edith is just trying to stay conscious. A few minutes later, Eliza is summoned, swearing she didn't do anything to the pie. This is exactly how it happened in the original. The boys have already gathered to protect their precious Eliza, of course. Despite Sophia's attempts to keep her quiet, Edith apologizes to her sister-in-law and tries to tone down the incident, pretending it's just a stomachache. Bestie, you're literally covered in blood. I'm not sure who's gonna believe that. Unsurprisingly, Cliff orders the servants to search their room. Sophia didn't even bother hiding the poison. Did she want it to be found, or was she really just that stupid? Cliff clearly thinks Edith did this to herself on purpose to frame Eliza, and leaves to analyze the poison. No word from Killian, that useless man. Isn't he even a little bit concerned about his wife? Once they all leave, Sophia takes out her anger on her mistress as usual. The boys take the poison straight to the doctor, who reveals that Edith hasn't been eating for a few days. Killian is shocked. His wife loves to eat, so she wouldn't be the type to do some crazy diet. He ends up convinced that she planned this on purpose, not to attack Eliza, but to get attention. He spends the rest of the day by her bedside, talking out loud to himself while he thinks she's asleep. Edith overhears him, and the poor girl is devastated. Once again, Killian can only think of her as a self-centered crazy girl with a hidden agenda. If I were her, I would have given him a slap by now. When the family meet to discuss the poisoning, the only one who stands up for her is Eliza. Edith is so touched when she hears this that she decides to get a present for her sister-in-law. A week later, she's finally recovered enough to return to work. But before she can get 2 feet from her bed, Killian storms in, screaming at her. Oh God, what now? Eliza was found unconscious after using the special thread Edith gave her as a present. They've already tested it. The thread was poisoned. This also happened in the original novel. Edith tried to avoid the same story from occurring by buying a pre-wrapped gift from the store. Did the plot itself interfere to make sure the story followed the original course? Or did someone somehow intercept her gift, poison the thread, and rewrap the present before it reached Eliza? This doesn't make any sense. Is anyone else's head starting to spin? As always, Killian accuses her first, but Edith begs him to think this through. Why would she attack Eliza when the family's already so suspicious of her? Desperate to prove herself, she asks him to send more maids to watch over her. That way, Sophia won't have so much power, and she can prove to the family that she isn't up to no good. Killian agrees and summons Anna to rejoin her service right away. Thank goodness, now maybe she can eat at least 1 meal a day. The two of them sit down to discuss potential culprits. Whoever's behind this clearly wants to hurt Eliza, and is trying to use Edith as a scapegoat. With that motive, wouldn't it make sense for the Sinclair siblings to be involved? Maybe they even have a spy inside the house. Killian resists at first, but it seems like he's trying to believe her. Frankly, she's more interested in Eliza's opinion than anyone else's, which comes as a surprise to her husband. For the millionth time, Edith tells him she doesn't have any reason to hate Eliza. Why would she care if her stepsister is more popular than her? After popping out a cool line like that, Killian has no choice but to kiss her. I guess he even surprised himself, because the first thing he does after pulling away is apologize. He always knows how to ruin the moment, doesn't he? A few days later, Eliza still hasn't regained consciousness, putting Edith in a very dangerous position. But to her surprise, Duke Rudwick decides to drop the investigation for the time being. Even if Killian can give his wife the benefit of the doubt, Cliff definitely can't, and neither can Princess Catherine. Uh-oh. If the Imperial family gets involved, then things could get real serious real quick. A few days later, Edith has recovered enough to be reassigned to working under Rhan. Her condition has improved a lot since Anna rejoined her service. She's able to eat her normal meals and hasn't been beaten once. But trouble is just around the corner. After hearing about Eliza's condition, Princess Catherine summoned Edith to the royal palace, which never happened in the original. The Duke and Duchess seem to think this is a good thing, but Edith knows better. Catherine is the Empire's wild card. If anyone's going to cause a scene, it would be her. Even so, Edith tries to stay positive as she steps into the royal palace, greeting Catherine in private. She's about as nasty as you'd expect, using her old surname and making a joke about Edith's habit of poisoning people. Yep, looks like this is going to go exactly as badly as we thought. Edith keeps calm, taking all the hits Catherine sends her way and quietly correcting the assumptions about her character. When the opportunity arises, she compliments the princess. In the original story, Catherine was one of her favorite characters for always defying the social norms and protecting her friends so fiercely. She just asks the princess to look at her with an open mind. After their brief talk, Edith returns home, where Sophia is waiting for her. Catching her in the hallway, she grabs her mistress by the throat and orders her to steal the tax records of the Duke's private office. And if she betrays the Riegelhoffs one more time, Sophia swears to kill her with her own hands. Yikes! Looks like we've reached a breaking point at last. Is it finally time to come clean with Killian? Will he even believe her? While she's strangling her, Sophia admits two important things. One, she had nothing to do with the poison thread incident, and two, she already has permission from Count Riegelhoff to murder his daughter. That is straight up cruel. I knew the Count was cold, but killing his own daughter just to frame a rival family? I really feel sorry for Edith. Recovering her breath, she threatens to tell the Rudwicks the truth about Sophia, but she laughs in her face. And actually, she makes a good point. If the Duke realizes that the Riegelhoffs have turned their back on Edith, then she no longer serves a purpose. If she's not being used to keep the peace between the families, then she can be discarded. Killian might even divorce her. Plus, the rules of this crazy world might not even let her tell him the truth. It's starting to look like she doesn't have a choice but to steal the papers, but surely she can think of something. For now, she's still got a job to do. Back in Rhan's office, she can finally have some time to herself. The work has been piling up while she was recovering, but it's nice to have a distraction. Unlike the others, Rhan never treats her with suspicion and doesn't ask any questions. When she hands in her work for the day, he compliments her ability to focus and says she's very helpful. For one thing, she prepares documents even better than he ever could. To his surprise, Edith starts to cry. Never, not in this life or her last one, did any recognize her for her hard work and diligence. So hearing Rhan of all people being so kind about her efforts just tipped her over the edge. Embarrassed, she tries to cover up her feelings. But to her surprise, Rhan encourages her to let it all out. Little does she know, her husband is listening at the door and even comes to see her later. She thought he'd be spending all his time with Eliza while she recovered, but it looks like there's only one girl on his mind these days. I guess their first night together left more of an impression than we thought. Maybe we're making some progress at last. Edith is flustered and tries to resist him. Don't ask me why. If I was her, I'd be all over him already. I mean, look at those eyes. He's only got one thing in mind, and I think we all know what. Killian finds it kind of funny that she's resisting him. The Edith Riegelhoff, the woman famous for taking men to bed and never being satisfied. Even after their wedding, the rumors about her didn't stop. Even these days, Killian has to hear other men talking about her beauty and seductive nature. That can't be fun. Edith is blushing bright red, too scared to speak. But when he leans in, he notices something. All at once, the realization comes rushing in. The Edith of rumor is nothing like the woman he knows now. She isn't cruel, she can be kind. She enjoys paintings, and nothing makes her happier than a meal prepared by the Rudwick family chef. And despite all the hardships she's faced, she doesn't lose her calm and never asks for help. It was only today, when he heard her crying in front of Rhan, that he even realized how much she's been struggling. And honestly, he was a little hurt. Why would she go to someone like Rhan and not her own husband? Maybe because you've been a terrible husband and you can't decide if you like her or hate her? Seriously, does this guy even have a brain? He's certainly not using it. He even thought she was trying to seduce Rhan by crying in front of him. But all that disappeared when he unbuttoned her dress and saw the bruises all over her body. He demanded an answer, but of course she couldn't tell him. In the end, she fell asleep and he applied ointment on her bruises. The next morning, he storms into her room and confronts Sophia. Turns out he does have a brain after all, and realized the only person capable of injuring his wife repeatedly like that was her maid. He's already spoken to the Riegelhoffs about it, and has agreed to send her back to them without any injuries. What a shame. I would have liked to see Killian give Sophia a taste of her own medicine. True to his word, he escorts Sophia to the carriage waiting for her, leaving Edith with Anna. The poor maid is shocked when she sees her mistress covered in wounds and bruises and asks why she never spoke up. Edith doesn't explain herself. Actually, she's a little overwhelmed to see how many people care for her. First Killian and now Anna? Maybe she does have some friends in this mansion after all. In a strange scene, we finally discover the person behind all of Edith's misfortune. This whole time, there was someone acting as the story itself, trying to force her onto Edith's original path and accept her fate as the villainess. How messed up is that? But this time, they've been failing. That's why there were so many rules and conditions put in place to keep her from telling the truth about her condition. The controller of this story is frustrated and confused. Why does Killian seem to care for her this time? And how did she know to befriend the extras, who he has less control over? Whatever messed up mastermind this guy is playing as, he's not ready to give it up just yet. Edith has come further than any of the other girls in her position, so he's going to take things up a notch. He set some kind of condition for progression to the second stage, which she has to meet today. The only problem is, we don't know what it is. Back in the story, Cliff and Killian are visiting Eliza in her sickbed. She asks Killian to take care of his wife, especially after everything she's been through with the poisoning and accusations. Specifically, she asks him to take her on walks, to have tea together, and talk kindly to her. What he should have been doing from the start, if you ask me. At this point, Edith is grateful, but kind of confused. Her husband must have put two and two together. I mean, come on. The Riegelhoffs literally sent a private carriage to pick Sophia up and even asked them not to harm her. By this point, he definitely knows that Edith isn't important to the Count, which means she has no value as a hostage. But instead of being thrown out, Edith has been taken care of and left to rest, which means Killian probably didn't tell his father. Of course, that doesn't mean she's safe. Although Sophia has been thrown out earlier than expected, there are some important plot points coming up that she was supposed to feature in. Now that she's out of the picture, Edith will probably have to handle them herself. She can't rely on Killian to shelter her from everything. Although he seems to be taking Eliza's advice to heart. He's certainly stepping up as a husband, inviting her for tea, asking her to have dinner with the family, and asking her on a walk through the gardens. But for some reason, she declines every offer. Poor Killian is starting to wonder if she just straight up doesn't like him. He really did want them to get closer. After all the confusion of the poison plots and rumors, he's been looking for a chance to get to know her without all the politics. He just wasn't expecting it to be this hard. Killian is just starting to spiral when Edith catches him outside her room. He mentions that the family acquired some strawberry tart from a famous bakery in town, and suddenly Edith seems interested. Once again, she resists, clearly disappointed to turn down the offer. After countless rejections, Eliza decides to do some probing and asks Edith why she won't hang out with her husband. Edith reassures her stepsister that she's perfectly satisfied and says it's nothing to do with him. Of all people, Killian has had to suffer a lot for his family, and their marriage is part of that. She just doesn't want to burden him or make him spend time with her out of duty. Oh, girl, she really has no clue, does she? He literally came to her bedroom twice and started taking off his clothes unprompted. And all this time I thought Edith was the smart one. Actually, he's been so persistent that she's starting to think he's watching her, looking for any sign she might be spying for the Riegelhoffs. After meeting with Eliza, he corners her one last time, inviting her to an opera performance. Edith does the worst thing possible and tells him to go with Eliza instead. That's the last straw for Killian, who finally snaps. He asks her who the heck she thinks he is, and Edith responds that he's her husband. On paper, that is. Ouch, that one's got a sting. Although, it's not like she's wrong. When Killian was told he'd be marrying Edith Riegelhoff for the sake of his family and the Emperor, he said goodbye to any hopes of marrying the one he truly loved, Eliza. But slowly, piece by piece, this wife he so despised has become someone he cares for, maybe even hope to love. Only she just said she has no intention of treating him like a real husband. She doesn't even want to spend time with him. He even asks if she's fallen for someone else like Rhan, which is kind of hilarious. He must really be down bad if he thinks she's fallen for the family secretary. Desperately trying to figure her out, he considers the possibility that maybe she only wants him for one thing. Taking her by surprise, he launches into a sudden kiss. Now he thinks she's a cold, heartless woman who only wants to take him to bed. But you can hardly expect her to refuse. I mean, look at that man. Would you say no? Fortunately for her, this misunderstanding has cleared the conditions for the second stage, and therefore reduced the power of the original novelist. And before you ask, no, the condition was not sleeping with Killian again. It was actually refusing 10 of Killian's requests. What kind of condition is that? Whoever this mastermind is, they really didn't want her passing the second stage. The novelist only set that condition because they knew how much Edith likes Killian. They didn't think she'd be able to resist. And now their grip on the plot and main characters has weakened, all because they underestimated her. Serves them right. If she makes it all the way to the third stage, then the original novelist control will completely disappear. Even the original plot will have less influence, giving Edith more free will to choose her own fate. If that happens, the characters can live on as they choose, even continuing their story after the end of the novel. The mastermind will do anything to stop that from happening, even if that means killing off a character. Buckle up, guys. It looks like the next stage is going to be even darker than the first. Back in Edith's room, she and Killian have made up, using their bodies, if you catch my gist. Edith, as any girl would be, is busy admiring her husband's muscles when he suddenly asks if what she said earlier was true. Does she see him as a man to take to bed, or something more? Of course, Edith isn't using him in that way, but she can't figure out why he cares. According to the original plot, it shouldn't be possible for Killian to fall in love with her. He's literally designed to be devoted to Eliza from start to bloody finish. In that case, this little flirtation is probably the result of his loneliness. Edith thinks she understands his character very well because she read the original. He spent his whole life in his brother's shadow. No matter how hard he worked, he can never compare to Cliff, the boy with every talent set to inherit the kingdom. The boy who has everything, including Killian's one true love. In a weird way, Edith, or at least the girl playing her, understands him the most. Even though she's convinced he doesn't feel the same way as her, Edith still doesn't want to hurt his feelings. So she stops pushing him away, starting with a little trip to the opera. Killian is shocked that a daughter of the Regelhoff household has never been to the opera before, but it's true. Even the real Edith never had the chance to go out and see shows like all the other noble girls. They watch a show named Odelette, which tells the story of a young girl from a prosperous household who finds an injured man in the woods one day. She nurses him back to health, having no idea that he's actually a prince from a neighboring kingdom. The two fall in love, obviously. But her father, a greedy viscount, arranges her marriage with a wealthy baron, who tries to tempt her away from the prince with his money, which would probably work on me if I'm honest. The poor girl Odelette is torn, and her performance is so impressive that Edith is moved to tears. Killian, silent and stony as ever, seems completely unemotional. At the end of the opera, he asks what she would do if she were Odelette. Edith doesn't even hesitate. She would choose the Baron in a heartbeat. That's right, girl. Money over men any day. Plus, as she points out, the secret prince was kind of a douche. He could have supported her family with his own wealth, but he kept his identity hidden to test her. Sounds toxic as heck if you ask me. When Killian calls Odelette superficial, Edith reminds him that their own situation isn't so different. In their world, marriage isn't always a matter of love. When family, honor, and politics are on the line, you have to think with your head, not your heart. For a moment, Killian sees Edith for her true self. Not a snake or a temptress, but a strong person who has been through more than most people realize. He asks her to take a walk together so they can talk a little more before heading home. They pass by a young girl selling flowers who is clearly starving. Seeing how sympathetic his wife looks, he buys the whole bouquet and gives it to Edith, who looks very touched. It's her first time receiving flowers, after all. Today is full of firsts. In her old life, she never got a bouquet, not even as a graduation gift. And while Edith was often sent flowers by suitors, they never made it into her hands. So it really does feel like a new experience for her. Suddenly, full of excitement, Edith leads her husband down the town streets with a smile on her face. Killian is seeing a whole new side of his wife tonight. I'm not sure if she's ever looked this carefree in the entire series. A slightly scary clown jumps out at them suddenly, pulling Edith away from him. When Killian asks the clown to leave her alone, he calls her his wife. Look at that smile! This boy is down so bad! Despite herself, Edith is starting to gain hope. Killian is already acting differently because she cleared the second stage. Maybe if she clears a third, they'll be free from the original plot. Free to act however they want, love however they want. When they get home, she thanks him for such a wonderful evening. They split up, leaving Killian to wander the hallways, where his thoughts of Edith are interrupted by Eliza. Aren't they always? She's really playing up the cutesy, innocent act, which makes Killian worried that he hasn't been paying her enough attention. And so what if he hasn't? He has a wife of his own to take care of. There's clearly something bothering her, so Killian asks if everything is all right. Hesitantly, Eliza tells him that someone saw his wife applying poison on the thread, and not just anyone, a trusted maid who has worked at the Rudwick estate for a long time. Today, she suddenly packed her bags and disappeared. Cliff spent all day tracking her down. Eliza acts like she's doing him a favor, like he deserves to know the truth. But let's be honest, I think we all know Eliza has a trick or two up her sleeve. Of all the people in the Rudwick estate who might want to tear Edith down, wouldn't she make the most sense? Plus, there's no way this innocent idiot act is for real. Honestly, it's starting to get on my nerves. Out of instinct, Killian starts blaming his wife, but before the words are out of his mouth, he hesitates. That's not his voice in his head. Has someone been planting them there to turn him against Edith? He reassures Eliza that Edith has no motive and would never try to hurt her sister-in-law. It's most likely the maid was pressured by someone to put Edith in the spotlight. Once again, it looks like there's a greater plan at work here. Someone is working very, very hard to turn the Rudwicks against Edith. Killian starts talking about investigating the family staff, making Eliza nervous. As soon as her expression changes, he's back to being a sweet older brother figure, lending her his coat and telling her to wrap up warm. Ugh. He also asks her to come straight to him next time, in case Cliff tries to handle any future incidents with Edith by himself. Eliza agrees and bids him goodnight, though it looks like there's something more she wants to say. Is it just me? Am I being paranoid, or is anyone else anti-Eliza? I just feel like she makes the most sense as a culprit. Anyway, for the next few days following the Opera House date, Killian insists on sharing every meal with his wife. It's a sweet gesture, but it's making her a bit uncomfortable. She still hasn't figured out that his affections are genuine, so one day she asks why his behavior has suddenly changed. Thinking she's finally caught on, Killian apologizes for all the mistakes he's made in the past. From now on, he wants to get to know her, the real her. He also said that he believes she's not the one behind the poisoning attempt on Eliza, which his wife is certainly grateful to hear. He asks if they can spend more time together in future, which is kind of a funny thing to say to someone you've married. Like, does he have to be so formal? He starts talking about her likes and hobbies, wanting to know every little thing about her. Edith turns bright red, as any girl would in that situation. If a man that handsome was begging to get to know me, I think I'd combust. From then on, Killian is a lot more inquisitive and always by her side. You might think it would be awkward, but after everything they've been through, it comes naturally to them. It's like all the walls have finally been torn down. Well, a few of them at least. He's starting to treat her like a real wife, asking her to bring a shawl around in case she catches a cold. Not unlike what he said to Eliza the other night. He also encourages her to stop hiding so much, especially when she's suffering. In the past, he used to find it irritating, but now he clearly wants to make up for being such a straight-up douchebag. Which would be cute if he wasn't being so obvious in front of the others. While they're having tea together, Eliza makes a comment about how natural they look these days, like a real married couple at last. Which is kind of weird coming from her. Killian continues to flirt shamelessly in front of his brother and Eliza, which is totally out of character. Edith suddenly wonders if he's trying to make her jealous. She really will find any excuse to ignore how much he likes her. Deciding to play along, Edith flirts back, taking her husband by surprise. As usual, Cliff can't stand the attention being off Eliza for even a second and scolds his brother for not listening to her. Which is weird. Wasn't Cliff usually dangling Eliza in his face, trying to make him jealous? It looks like he's turned his sights on someone else. Perhaps his new target is Edith, and he wants to remind her how close Eliza and Killian are. Edith tunes out of the conversation, missing a moment where Eliza asks for permission to go shopping with her husband. When she refocuses, Killian only has eyes for her, worrying about the cold weather affecting her health. As soon as Eliza sees it, she changes her mind and decides to go with Cliff instead. Looks like someone's finally catching on. She's clearly dejected, so Killian suggests they all go together. That way no one will feel left out. Once again, Cliff interrupts. Him, the Duke, and Edith have another date at the Imperial Palace, so looks like Eliza and Killian will have to go alone after all. What is with this guy? He used to hate the idea of his brother spending time with Eliza, and now he's basically forcing them together? He's definitely up to something. She's still thinking about it as they walk back toward the mansion, where the Duke is chatting with an unexpected visitor. Damien Sinclair is not a welcome visitor in the Rudwick house, and it's odd for him to turn up now of all times. When the two are having dinner later, Killian explains that there's been some trouble with the Riegelhoff mines. It now looks like the Sinclairs are involved. While he dives deeper into family politics, Edith heads back into town the next morning, where she and Anna interrogates her about her feelings for Killian. She heard about Killian and Eliza going shoe shopping, and it turns out the street they're planning to visit is famous for dates. Anna seems surprised that Edith let him go, and even offers to step in and say something on her behalf. Edith is grateful to have someone looking out for her. Anna is certainly quite a contrast from Sophia, but she assures her everything is fine. Besides, she's more focused on getting as much cash as possible, in case she has to run away once the political situation deteriorates. She's already sold a dress and some of her more expensive jewelry. No matter how kind Killian has become, she still doesn't want to rely on him. She learned that lesson from her first life, never to trust anyone except herself. As the girls are walking back through the restaurant after their meal, Killian comes running up to them. He heard about her selling her dresses and jewelry, and boy, is he mad. It's not exactly a good look for the family. Edith hadn't even thought about how it might reflect on Killian and apologizes at once. When she explains she was just trying to save up money, Killian realizes that something has gone horribly wrong. She's been given an allowance every month, but Edith never received it. Someone's been stealing her money. If Killian was upset before, he's now positively furious. He can't understand why she always stays quiet when she's suffering. Like a typical guy, he finds a way to make it about himself, wondering if she doesn't trust him to protect her. Yeah, no duh. You weren't exactly acting like a role model husband until about a week ago. He promises to go and buy back her things and encourages to speak with Rhan about her monthly allowance. But now there's a more pressing matter, her date at the Imperial Palace, and whatever the heck Cliff has in store for her. The atmosphere in the carriage is tense, to say the least. Cliff comments about how much closer Edith and Killian seem these days, though he seems pretty sure it won't last. He even compares her to Eliza. He's practically asking for a fight. Strangely, Cliff thinks he and Edith have the same goal. She wants her husband's affections, and he wants Eliza to himself. At this point, she jumps in and insists she won't force Killian to care for her, but her brother-in-law doesn't seem so sure. After all, Killian's personality switch was pretty sudden. What if one day he changes back and starts resenting her again? The more Cliff speaks, the more Edith realizes just how bad the brothers' relationship is. Maybe this is why Killian became such a douchebag, because his cruel older brother made him that way. He gives Edith a few tips to get closer to her husband, and mentions something about a maid named Sabina. It all seems very suspicious, and in the end, Edith can't shake the feeling she just had a brush with the real villain of the series. But there's no time to dwell. She's got a princess to meet. This time, Catherine insisted she change into riding clothes. Today, she's gonna learn to ride a horse. Though it's not as fun as it sounds. Edith is very nervous, and the princess is not a good teacher. All she seems to do is scream at her, correcting even the tiniest of mistakes. But it turns out this was a favor from Killian, who asked the princess to teach his wife the basics. As you might remember, the territory Killian is due to inherit is far out from the capital, and will require her to ride a horse to get around. The princess was shocked when he asked her for the favor, but for whatever reason, Killian thought she wouldn't be comfortable learning with him. Actually, the reason is pretty obvious. She outright refused when he offered. Catherine really didn't get it. She doesn't care about politics herself, but she knows enough to hate the Riegelhoffs. The princess, like most other people, was expecting Killian to get rid of Edith once the situation with the Count resolved itself. Although, this was news to him. Killian was upset that the princess thought of him as that kind of guy, and that she thought so badly of Edith. He couldn't exactly tell her the truth, that the Riegelhoffs don't care about her. In fact, they treated her worse than their own enemies. So instead, he asked Catherine to meet his wife and spend some time with her so she can decide for herself who the real villains are. It doesn't take more than a few minutes for the princess to realize he was right. None of the rumors match up to this nervous-looking girl on a horse. She even goes so far as to apologize. I get the sense that's not something the princess does often. Catherine admits that she, like the other nobles, blamed her immediately for Eliza's poisoning without even looking at the facts. She sincerely asks for forgiveness. By that point, Edith is already crying. See? Who could possibly call this girl a snake? She's such a sweetie. While she and the princess are having some girl time, Eliza is enjoying her shopping day with Killian. Unfortunately, the shop they plan to visit is already closed. Probably because he spent so much time with Edith that he made them late. At least they managed to pick up the shoes she ordered. Like a true gentleman, he fits them for her. A perfect match for a cute girl like her. He thinks back to when they were younger, when she seemed to shine like the sun. All he wanted was to have her affection, and for most of his life, he thought that was love. Now, thanks to a certain someone, his mind has changed. He gets up to order a few more pairs of the shoes, but asks to place an order for his wife too. It needs to be fast. They're planning to head to his territory soon before the end of the year. Eliza seems worried to hear this and asks if Edith will be going too. That's a weird question. She's his wife. Why wouldn't she? She smooths the tension with an excuse. Since Edith is one of her only friends, she's just sad, that's all. It's true that Eliza hasn't had much chance to make friends with the other noble girls. Killian brushes it aside, but things get weird again when she suddenly takes his arm walking down the street. Does this girl have no shame? That's a married man. She's practically begging to start a rumor. Again, she acts all sad and sentimental now that she knows he'll be leaving soon. To draw out their time together, they visit a few more shops, where Eliza gets all dolled up and keeps asking for Killian's opinion. Real subtle. He buys everything she tried on, and for a moment, it looks like his affections have returned. But the next place they visit is a jewelry shop where Killian is determined to buy some gifts for his wife. Eliza's heart sinks, watching him pick out elegant designs, complimenting his wife's taste. She is not at all how the rumors made her seem and prefers simple pieces, he tells her. That evening, Cliff is walking the halls when he catches his brother giving Edith the gifts. He even fits one of the ribbons himself and starts blushing when she turns around. Yep, I think it's safe to say Eliza is well and truly out of the picture now, which is good news for Cliff. Feeling victorious, he goes to visit Eliza, who is sulking in bed. She's clearly disappointed. After an unsuccessful attempt to win back Killian's affections, she only deepened his bond with Edith. Eliza insists that's not what she was trying to do, but Cliff doesn't believe her. He's mad, actually. He wants to be the only one she thinks about, the only man who has her affections. Is it just me, or does anyone else think he looks kind of scary? Eliza must be used to this. She doesn't flinch or move away. She insists she's just tired and asks about his day, if he finished his work already. She even wishes she'd gone shopping with him instead. Cliff mentions something about how Killian hasn't gone yachting this summer the way he normally does. I don't know why, but for some reason that triggers Eliza, who looks hella uncomfortable. Anyone else getting major controlling vibes right now? The eldest son of Duke Rudwick is obsessive over her. He'll do anything to make her happy, to keep her satisfied so that she'll stop thinking about his brother. That kind of obsession is dangerous. Looks like this competition between the Rudwick sons might finally be coming to a head soon. Meanwhile, Edith has decided to make use of the tip that Cliff gave her and ask Killian to take her out on the yacht. His advice was to lean into her husband's hobbies and give him lots of compliments. It's a little weird to be following Cliff's advice when she doesn't trust him, but if it's something Killian enjoys, then they should at least give it a try. He seems to like the idea and suggests they take the yacht out tomorrow. The next day, Eliza catches her on her way to the docks and starts telling her about all the times she and Killian took the yacht out and went fishing together. It's hard to tell if she's trying to rub their history in her face or just genuinely sharing a memory, but she does compliment the couple, saying how good they look together these days. When Killian arrives, she excuses herself, giving them privacy for their little date. The weather is beautiful, a perfect day to enjoy the lake, just the two of them. Edith is having a wonderful time and can't believe her luck. Killian is treating her like a gentleman should, pulling her away from the edge and offering his jacket. Edith thinks he's about to give her a kiss, but he doesn't get the hint at first. When does he ever? She's just teasing him about it when he leans over and takes her like something out of a fairy tale. It's truly a magical day, which means it's just about time for something to go horribly wrong. Yesterday, when they were discussing the yacht ride, she decided to wear a pretty comfortable dress with a lovely hat. They talked about bringing a picnic, and all the preparation with the boatmaster went smoothly. Everything was just perfect. When Edith saw the yacht, her eyes lit up. She'd never been on a yacht before in either of her lives and was excited to have yet another first with her husband. In the moment where he kissed her, she wished that time would stay still so she could live this moment forever and ever. It's always when things are at their most perfect that it starts to go wrong. When they pulled away from the kiss, Killian promised to pick up where they left off once they got home. He knows all the right lines, doesn't he? Instead of turning the trip into one long makeout session, they managed to restrain themselves in time for a picnic lunch. Killian was about to anchor the boat when he noticed something wrong with the sail. Just one yank, and suddenly everything is in the air, including Edith. She was too stunned to know what was happening until she hit the water. Now, you might be thinking this isn't such a big deal. Surely she knows how to swim. But you're forgetting that dresses from this time period are extremely heavy. And when they're wet, well, let's just say it's like swimming with chainmail. Coupled with the freezing cold water, Edith immediately begins to panic. She tries to stay calm, remembering that her destiny is to be killed by Killian. She's not going to drown. It's not in the original plot. But then again, Edith never set foot in a yacht in the original. Who's to say she couldn't die here? Her suspicions are confirmed when a notification screen pops up, claiming she has 3 minutes until her death. If she dies, everything goes back to the way it was. Maybe Killian would forget about her. Maybe he would hate her again. Luckily, she doesn't have to find out, because her hero of a husband dives in right after her, pulling her to the surface just in time. When Edith wakes up, she's in bed, with Anna watching over her. While sipping a cup of water, she tries to piece together what the heck just happened. All along, she tries to resist the original plot, and all along, the plot fought back. Whoever is controlling this crazy world always chose the least desirable conditions for her to pass to the next stage. They even threatened her life. When she passed out, Edith returned to the body of Choi Su-na and saw another system notification. Because the novelist intervened too much, more of the original plot has fallen apart. And once again, the novelist's control over the characters has weakened. Is this all because Killian saved her? The novelist wasn't expecting him to risk his life, and because of that, they've lost control. Speaking of her husband, it seems like he's also lost control. He's currently interrogating that poor boatmaster. Uh-oh, this is gonna be hard. How is Edith going to prove he's innocent? It's not like she can tell Killian this is all a made-up world inside a webtoon controlled by a murderous psychopath. Even Anna knows it couldn't have been the boatmaster. He's not that kind of person. Edith can't just sit by while her maid weeps, so she asks her to summon Killian. As you probably guessed, he was absolutely terrified when she fell in the lake. He didn't even hesitate and dove right in after her. Even when they got to the shore, he couldn't stop screaming, begging her to open her eyes. Poor guy. Suddenly, all the moments they had spent together came back to him. All her precious smiles, all the times he couldn't stop thinking of her, all the gifts he wanted to buy. But he remembered the bad times too. Those times where they couldn't trust each other, where he saw her as just another Riegelhoff, less than a human being. He sure regrets them now. Anna and a guard find him in the dungeons, torturing the boatmaster, Mr. Samuel. Like Anna, he believed Samuel was a man with integrity and honor, but now, blinded by rage, he's convinced they were betrayed. The only thing that distracts him is hearing that Edith has awoken. He rushes into her bedroom, screams her name, and pulls her into a tight hug. Damn, if that doesn't scream I love you, I don't know what will. Surely Edith will realize now. The poor man is literally shaking. He looks pretty worn down, almost like he's the one who nearly died and not her. Edith is just happy to see him and asks what happened on the boat. Apparently, the issue was with the sail. The rope was tangled, and so when he tried to shift direction, the boat lost balance and tipped. It's something a seasoned boatmaster would have known to look for. That's why he's suspicious of Samuel. He thinks someone might have ordered him to deliberately mess with the yacht. He's about to return to the interrogation when Edith stops him. Killian knows as well as she does that the old man is totally loyal to the Rudwick family. And besides, if he was ordered to tamper with the boat, wouldn't it be way too obvious it was him? She can't explain the truth of the situation, so instead she draws a comparison. This incident is a lot like where Eliza and her were poisoned. It's all the novelist's doing, but they must have been acting through someone. The novelist has less control over the characters who aren't so involved in the main story, so it's unlikely that Samuel was being manipulated. That's why the novelist had to rely on characters who already hated Edith, or who were part of the main cast. If she said literally any of this to Killian, he'd probably think she went mad. And could you blame him? Instead, she begs him to take her seriously. She has a strong feeling that Samuel isn't the culprit. It's a lot to ask anyone to take a feeling over circumstance, but Killian trusts her. Plus, there's no actual evidence tying Samuel to the crime, other than the fact that he's the boatmaster. So he orders the guards to release him. He won't be fired, and they've even given him extra vacation to recover from, being interrogated and falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit. The old man is shocked. He can hardly speak as his bonds are being released. It's all thanks to Edith and her crazy hunch, so Killian asks him to return her trust by working hard at his position. Honestly, I can't believe the old man hasn't run for his life already. I'd have already handed him my 3 weeks' notice if I were him. When he discussed it with Edith, Killian wanted to punish him, at least for missing a crucial mistake with the boat. But from her perspective, he did nothing wrong. It wouldn't make sense to punish him. She is remarkably calm for a woman who nearly drowned to death this morning. Killian is more than a little suspicious, but then again, she's endured more than her fair share of near-death experiences since coming to the Rudwick estate. She's practically a pro by now. Even though he didn't agree, he followed her wishes and left her to get some rest. He still couldn't shake the memory of her pale face when he pulled her from the water. It's still tormenting him later that evening while trying to conduct his investigation. Whoever's behind this, it's clear they were after Edith. Women are always more at risk at sea because of their heavy clothing. Maybe that points to the Riegelhoff family? They were all too eager to kill her earlier and would probably have done so if Sophia hadn't been discovered. Or perhaps the Sinclairs, who want Edith's position vacated so they can marry their sister to Killian. It all feels so similar to the last few incidents, and he can't shake the feeling that he's missing something. Something big. He's interrupted by Samuel, the boatmaster, who came to share his side of the story. The night before the yachting trip, he checked the whole ship over and everything was in order. But there was something suspicious. Early the next day, he stepped away from the boat for a moment. Cliff came down to see him and asked for his help finding something for Eliza. If someone did tamper with the boat, it must have happened then. In Samuel's mind, he's still at fault for leaving the boat unattended, even if it was for just a short while. But Killian is just grateful that he spoke up, despite the fear of punishment. Now there's an added layer of confusion to this mess. Why would Cliff go all the way to the lake at sunrise just to find something for Eliza? I mean, I know he's obsessive, but isn't that a little suspicious? It throws both Eliza and Cliff into suspicion. With every incident since Edith moved in, the two of them were involved, always right at the center of the drama. They were never really under investigation, since it was impossible to imagine that either of them might be behind this string of violence. But for the first time, Killian is seriously considering that his brother and lover could be the true culprits. Finally! Took him long enough! The next few days after the accident, Killian takes very good care of his wife, even feeding her cake in bed. That is literally the dream. He tells her what Samuel said and how sorry he was about the accident. It was Edith's mercy that prompted him to come forward, so once again they've made progress, all thanks to her. Cliff and Eliza appear soon after with a bouquet of flowers. For the first time ever, Cliff actually wants to apologize to Edith. He feels responsible for causing the accident, since he was the one who suggested they go boating. That's what he says, anyway. I doubt he feels even the slightest bit sorry. Edith seems to have made the same connection her husband has, that Eliza or Cliff might be the person behind these attacks. Although technically, any of the main cast could be being controlled by the novelist, including her husband. Worried about her recovery, Killian sends them away. But at this point, Edith is more worried for him. He hasn't slept properly in days. It seems like this investigation is taking a toll on him. She asks him to stop putting his safety second all the time, like when he jumped in the water straight after her. That's inconceivable to Killian. But if these kind of incidents keep happening, then one day he could be in danger too. The last thing Edith wants is for him to get hurt because of her. Over the next few days, rumor of the accident quickly spreads. It has a positive impact on Edith's reputation inside the mansion, but out in society, the reception is mixed. The Sinclairs, for one, are delighted to hear that someone in the Rudwick family might have tried to kill her. I guess we can rule them out as suspects then. Though the Sinclair sister is a lot less happy when she finds out Killian risked his life to save her. As always, she takes the opportunity to make Edith look like an outcast. Since they haven't yet found a culprit, and even the boatmaster wasn't punished, it could look like no one in the Rudwick estate cares enough to find her attempted murderer. The next day, the estate is busy with preparations for the National Foundation Day. Cliff has called in the imperial dressmaker herself to ensure Eliza has the most gorgeous outfit of all. He's always so extra. Edith, on the other hand, was just planning to wear something she already has. But Killian already has other plans. He wants to take her to the boutique in town so they can get matching outfits together. Okay, that's adorable. I can't wait to see the look on the Sinclair sisters' face. They visit a boutique owned by the fabulous Mofet Dahlia, who is very eager to show them some raunchy designs. It's not really Edith's style. Well, maybe it was the old Edith style, but it's definitely not now. They decide to take a look at a pair of outfits just in case. Although the dress is a little fancy, you can't deny she looks drop-dead gorgeous. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!